Okay, today's daf is going to be daf Gittin, Masechta Gittin, daf Samach Hey, and we will begin on daf Samach Dalet Amid Beis by Amar Rabbi Yehuda, about 13 lines from the bottom. We're talking about what the power of a katan is. Yes, so we're just starting daf Samach Dalet Amid Beis, right by the 13 lines from the bottom. So the Gemara is discussing regarding a katan. What is the power of a katan? Can a katan, there we go. Hi, Louis.
Hi.
We just began, and we're in Daf Samach Dalet Amid Beis, about 13 lines from the bottom. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, and I'm going to point it out and make it bigger, and you have it right here. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Rabasi. We're talking about what is the power of a katan. Let's say a katan finds something in the street. He finds a watch in the street. And he picks it up. Is it his? So it depends if it's a 2-year-old or a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, even if it's your grandkid, if he picks it up, it's not his, because obviously they're too young to have the power to acquire something. So Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Rabasi, Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rabasi, if you have a katan who tzrar v'zraikar, if he picks up a rock, he'll throw it away. Egois, if he sees a walnut, v'noitla, he will take it. So he has enough intelligence to differentiate between a walnut and a stone. So zoichel atzma, he has the power to acquire things for himself. The ein zoichel acherim, but he can't acquire something for somebody else. For example, if this katan would pick up something and say, you know what, I don't want to keep it. I'm acquiring on behalf of my father. Then it would not work. Now, just bear in mind, this whole idea of a katan acquiring something is only drabanan. The whole thing is a drabanan anyway, because he's not bar mitzvah. But the rabbanan only gave this guy, the kid, the power to acquire something for himself, but he cannot acquire it on behalf of somebody else. But what happens if he gets a little bit older and you can trust him? He's, let's say 8 years old. You give him chayfetz, an object, and then he can return it after a period of time. So he knows how to hold on to something and then to return it to its rightful owner. So if he has that kind of intelligence, then he could acquire something not only for himself, but he could acquire it for somebody else. So if, example, an 8-year-old would pick up an object on the street and he says, I don't want to keep it, I want to keep it for my father, it really belongs to the father. That's what the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda was. But when I said this statement in front of Shmuel, Amali, he told me, Davada Achasi. There's no differentiation between a katan. My Davada Achasi, what do you mean there's no differentiation, no matter how young the kid is? Amar Rav Chisda said, what Shmuel meant to say is that no matter what, a katan, as long as he's under bar mitzvah, the Rabbanim only gave him power to acquire something on behalf of himself, but he cannot have the power to acquire something on behalf of somebody else. So that is the opinion of Shmuel. But Rabbi Yehuda holds you do have the power to acquire something on behalf of someone else. So the Gemara asks a question. Mosav Rav Chinana Vardaan. Rav Chinana, who came from the city of Vardanya, he asked the question. We learned in a Mishnah in Masechta Erevim. Ketzad mishatfim b'movui. How do they do a shtufei mavois? Remember the picture of the alleyway, and there's little courtyards on the side of the alleyway. Now, min haTorah, you could carry in the alleyway as long as you're not carrying in the Rosh Hashanah. But since the alleyway is a function of looks like a Rosh Hashanah, because there's so many courtyards opening into the alleyway, they required you to have like an Erev. It's called a Shtufei Mavois, a partnership with all the members that enter into the alleyway. So what they do is they put an item of food, let's say a barrel of wine, and everybody chips into this barrel of wine, and they put it in one of the chatzers, so that everybody is like a owner of the wine and has rights to one particular courtyard that enters into the alleyway. And that is like an Erev that allows anybody who's any courtyard, any person in the courtyard to go walk into the alleyway. Now, Ketzad mishatfin b'mavi. How do you do shtufe mavois? Maniach esachavius. Let's say a person who owns a courtyard and he wants to invite all the other owners of their courtyard into this Erev. So what he does is he takes a barrel of wine, let's say, and he said, Harezu l'chol b'nei hamavi. I am selling this or gifting this barrel to all the people who are in the courtyard. And obviously the people who are who own the courtyards are not there when he does this. So what does he do? He could just have representing all the people in the courtyard, his daughter or his son who are over bar mitzvah. Or he can have representing all the people of the Mavi in this kinyan, on through his servant, or his maid who is Jewish. So that's the Gemara is going to hone in on what does it mean, his maid who is Jewish. That means the maid who is Jewish is going to kind of acquire this barrel of wine on behalf of all the other owners of the courtyard. Now, Hi Shifcha Hechidami. How old is this Jewish maid? If she's over bas mitzvah and has 2 hairs under her arm, my boyagabe. What is it? Why is she called a maid? A girl who reaches puberty is automatically, if she was a maid, a Jewish maid, she gets released. Elalav deloy asir saras. It's talking about a girl, a maid, a Jewish maid that's not bas mitzvah yet. She didn't bring the 2 hairs. Uktani, and the Mishnah says zoicha la'acherim. She acquires the barrel on behalf of all the other people in the courtyard. Now, how does that work? You just told me that somebody, according to Shmuel, as long as if they're under bas mitzvah, they cannot acquire something on behalf of somebody else. So how does it work? By shtufei mevoyes. Answers the Gemara, shan is shtufei mevoyes. The whole concept of doing shtufei mevoyes is drabanan, and it's only drabanan anyway. So in this scenario, only in this scenario, did the rabbanan give a power to a katana to acquire something on behalf of other people. But let's say a katana picking up a object in the street, it's not a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, that's dining d'Oraisa, finding a lost object and acquiring it. There, the Rabbanan did not give her power to acquire it on behalf of somebody else. Let's say she wants to acquire it on behalf of her parents. So that's only by shtufim mevoyes they allowed this to go through. Amar Rav Chizda said, Ishtek Vardoin. Vardoin, who asked this question, was silent. He's too passive. It was a very good question. So the Gemara says, "My havelei lemeimer." What should he have said on the answer we gave him? That shtufei mevoyes is the rabbanan. That's why there's a leniency for a katana to acquire on behalf of somebody else. So Rav Chizda explained that Rav Chinina should have not taken this answer standing down, passively. He should have answered, even though shtufei mevoyes is rabbanan, called the tikkun rabbanan. Whenever the rabbis made a mitzvah, we go to Samachei Amar Aleph, Ke'ein Daraisa tikkun. They should make it as if it's a din daraisa, and therefore it should have the same din as any daraisa where a katana's acquisition on behalf of somebody else should not work. The idach, and the one who answered the teretz, he didn't hold of that answer because ki amrinin called the tikkun rabbanon ke'ein daraisa tikkun. When do you say rabbis try to establish their rules as if it's a daraisa rule? Is b'milsa the isla iko min Torah, on something that has a basis in the Torah. If you have an idea in the Torah and the Rabbanan added something to it, so they made their addition to be similar to the daraisa. Aval b'milsa the lesla iko min Torah, the whole concept of something that has no basis in the Torah. There's no basis in the Torah for people who are in a private courtyard entering into a public alleyway to make a Erev, because that's not a Rishus HaRabim. So the rabbis made the whole thing up. So therefore, they didn't establish it that it should have the same dinim, the same laws as a din daraisa, and therefore they gave this leniency that in this case, a girl who normally we would say a girl cannot acquire something on behalf of somebody else, a girl who's under bas mitzvah by shtufa mevoyes could acquire something on behalf of somebody else. So if her owner gave her a barrel and said to his maid who's under bas mitzvah, acquire this barrel on behalf of all the other people who own courtyards in this alleyway, it works. So the Gemara, Masiv Rav Aiva. Rav Aiva asked a question. Again, same question. The question is, I'm going to prove to you that a girl under bas mitzvah, not only can she acquire something on behalf of herself, she could acquire something on behalf of somebody else. Ma'arimin al ma'isa sheni. The Mishnah says that we can do a trickery on ma'isa sheni. Normally, if I have fruits that are ma'isa sheni, if I want, which belong to Hegdish, I mean, I have to eat it in Jerusalem. So, but if I want to transfer the kedusha of the ma'isa sheni onto money, I have to add 20%. So let's say it's $100 worth of fruit, I have to transfer it to $120 worth of money. But if somebody does not want to add to that, he doesn't want to lose 20%. So he, Ketzad, what does he do? He tells his oldest son or oldest daughter, again, he tells his maid, who's a Jewish maid, hey, here's exactly $100. And you should be redeemed the ma'isa sheni on my behalf. Well, if somebody doesn't own the ma'isa sheni and he's doing it on behalf of somebody else, then you don't have to add the 20%. So now the Gemara is going to ask the question. The fact that we see that a maid could do this is the maid basically, in effect, is buying the fruits off Hegdish, right? By transferring the kedusha of the money of the fruits onto the money. And who is going to benefit from those fruits? Who's going to now own the fruits? Her master. So she's acquiring something on behalf of her master. And now let's examine, how old is this shivcha? Hi shivcha hechidami. What is the case of the shivcha? Ida asya beisaras. If she's has 2 years, ma boya gabe. What's she still doing by him? A shivcha, a Jewish shivcha who brings 2 years is automatically free. This girl did not bring 2 years, and yet she can acquire something on behalf of her owner. So we see that even a girl who's under bas mitzvah could acquire something on behalf of her owner, of somebody else. So that's a question against Shmuel. And says the Gemara, here we're talking about b'maisa bezman hazeh drabanan with ma'isa sheni, which is nowadays, which is only drabanan anyway. So because there's no Beis Hamikdash and only ma'isa shenis is only drabanans, so therefore they allow this leniency of a katana acquiring something on behalf of somebody else. So the Gemara, if that's what the Bryce is talking about, nowadays is it possible for a man to own a Jewish girl slave, a Jewish girl maid? V'atanya, we learned in the Brisa, ain't ever this whole concept of having a Jewish slave or a Jewish maid was only during the time that there was yovel. But nowadays there is no yovel anymore. So b'zman hazeh, there is no concept of having an Oma Avriya in your home. Ella, says the Gemara, right. It's talking about, the Brisa is talking about a time when a person could have had a Jewish maid as a slave. But what was the ma'isa sheni that made it d'Rabbanan? Ba'atza she'ein nokov d'Rabbanan. It was in a flower pot that doesn't have, it's not perforated, doesn't have a hole. So the whole, anything that grows from just a flower pot that has no hole from the bottom is anyway chayv ma'aser only d'Rabbanan. And therefore, since this whole concept is only d'Rabbanan, therefore they allowed the leniency of her acquiring it on behalf of somebody else. Now let's go to the summary of how to treat people who are under bar mitzvah or under bas mitzvah. So you can pay attention, and this will give you the general rules. Amar Rava. Rava said, Gimel midis bekatim. There are 3 age stages of somebody under bar mitzvah. Let's say they're between 4 and 6. Sror v'zorker, they're a type of kid that if you give them a rock, they throw it away. Egos, if you give them a walnut, v'noitlei, they know how to take it. So then, they could acquire, they have the intelligence to acquire something on behalf of themselves, and they don't have the intelligence to acquire something on behalf of somebody else. So if they pick up an object that's lost item, and they want to keep it for themselves, that item belongs to the katan. Nobody is allowed to take it. Uknegdan bektana. And this corresponds also to a girl who's also 4 and 6 years old. A girl who's 4 and 6 years old, let's say, we learned many times that if she doesn't have a father, her mother and brother could marry her off. If she's 4 and 6 years old and she was married off by her mother, the widow, or her brother, then miskadesha, she could become kedushin. And lemian, if she doesn't like the guy, she doesn't need a get. She could say, I don't like this guy, and walk out of the marriage. But if she's, let's say, below 2 years old, let's say, then even if her brother and mother married her off, let's say she was 2 years old, then there's no kedushin there. It only works if the girl's 4 to 6 years old. Then she already even 4 and above, basically. Then it's a kedushin where she doesn't need a get. But if she wants to get out of this out of this marriage, she just says, "Miyun, I don't like him." Hapuutis. So second stage is between 6 and 10 years old. Mekha meko, midkur mech. Whatever they sell is good. Their business transactions are good. B'metalton on movable items, let's say store items, not real estate. Uknegdem bektana. And a knegd, we say that the corresponding age between 6 and 10, also by a girl who's that age, miskereshes bekedushi avia, she can get divorced by herself. She can accept a get even if her father married her off. When a father marries off a girl who's 10 years old, she's really midaraisa married to the guy, but she can have a yad to accept a get after she's totally married. Not that she's engaged, she's totally married. Then she can receive a get, because such a girl, once she receives a get, understands it's over. She's not coming back to that same house. Hegia la'oinas nedarim. But let's say these girls or boys reach to age 11 or 12. By a girl, it's 11. By a boy, it's 12. Nidreya neder v'hagdish hagdish. Whatever they say is holy, and then the oaths are oaths. Promises are promises. Uknegdem b'ketana, and a ketana, if her husband died and she has 2 heirs, she can receive a chalitza already at that age. I don't think she does yibam, but she could do chalitza. Now the Brisa says, what happens? A fascinating thing. I love this. If a man died and left his real estate to his son, so even if he's over bar mitzvah, he's not allowed to sell that items, because the Chazal prohibited from selling it because he has no business experience. So he has to wait the limka benichse avev to sell your father's Yerusha, your inheritance that you got from your father. You have to wait till you have enough business experience ben Esrim until you're 20 years old. Back into the Mishnah. Mishnah says, a katana who hired, she's, let's say, 10 years old. She hired a man to accept the get on her behalf. The get is not really a get until she receives it. Why? Because if the Baal wants to retract before she actually received the get, his retraction is good. She ain't katan ois shliach, because we know a katan cannot make a shliach. It's probably from psukim. The whole concept of a shliach we learn from a pasuk. So just like the man who makes the shliach has to be over bar mitzvah, it's just like the shliach has to be over bar mitzvah. The person that makes a shliach has to be over bas mitzvah, and therefore, if she's a katana, the act that she made a shliach doesn't work. Vim amaloi avia. But if the father made a shliach, say v'skabel libiti gita, go accept for my daughter a get, then the father has a right to hire a shliach, and therefore, if the husband wants to retract, he cannot retract. Now, here's a very interesting thing. A man gave instructions and then went away, right? And we can't ask him what he meant. Someone said to a shliach, a man, 10 gets el ishti. I want you to give this get to my wife. B'mokim pliny, in this particular place. Let's say he says, I want you to give the get to my wife only if she's in Brooklyn. But the shliach went and gave it to her while she was in the 5 towns. Puzzle, because that's puzzle. Why? Because he was pretty straightforward with his instructions. Only give the get in Brooklyn, not in the 5 towns. But if he said to the shliach, Hare hi b'mokim pliny, you can find my wife in Brooklyn, then he didn't specifically mean that the get should be given in Brooklyn. If she gave it in another place, let's say he gave it in the 5 towns, then it's kosher, because he's only showing where you can find my wife, but he's not specific. He's not specifying that it has to be done in that mokum plain, in that original place. But what's the opposite case? Ha'isha she'amra, a woman that says to her shliach, "Iskabeli giti b'makam ploini," I want you to accept the get in a certain place. V'kiblu la b'makam acher, and the guy got it in a different place. Let's say he said, accept the get. She said, you can receive the get in Brooklyn. And the shliach received the get in the 5 towns. Puzzle, same idea. It's puzzle, which is a little strange. But we'll see in the Gemara to explain that. Rab Lazar says it's kosher because a woman has no power. We'll see that in the Gemara. Now, here's this case. Have le giti mimokim ploini. If a woman said, bring me a get from this and this place. Now, here, even the Tanakama who says that a woman, when she says she wants it in a certain place, and if it's done, if you deviate from those instructions, it's puzzle. Here, if the woman said, bring me the get from a certain place, and you brought the get from another place, it's still kosher, because it's still kosher get, because the fact is the get doesn't take effect until she actually receives it. So who cares where the shliach picked up the get? If he picked it up in this place or that place, her instructions to the shliach was only when you bring it to me, that's when I'm accepting the get. So she's personally accepting the get. So it doesn't matter where the shliach brought it from. Now the Gemara asks, why in the beginning, when a man gives instructions, I want you to only give the get in a certain place, even Rab Loza agrees it's puzzle. And yet, the opposite case, when a woman says, only accept the get in a certain place, and he accepted it in a different place, Rab Loza says it's kosher. Why did he argue? So the answer is very simple. Ihu, when a man gives instructions, he's the one that in the driver's seat. The misdaitim is garish. He is the one deciding to give the get. It doesn't matter if she agrees with it. It's up to him to give the get. So kapet. So when he gives instructions, he's very specific that he wants it to be followed. But she's only receiving a get against her will. So how could she go give instructions to somebody, only receive the get in such and such a place? Maybe the husband's not going to want to give it in such and such a place. So her instructions are meaningless. So Mara Mokim Hiloi, when she says that receive it in such a place, she's basically just saying that my husband is in such and such a place, but not that you only have to receive it in such and such a place. And even if she receives it in a different place, what Lazar will say, it's kosher. Next Mishnah. Ha'aveli Gittin. A woman said, bring me my get. Oh, so when is it a get? Only when she actually holds on to the get in her hand. The shliach is just bringing it to her. So let's acheles b'truma. She can eat the truma achegia get the other till she actually receives the get, because she's still considered married. But let's say he told her hiskabeli giti, I want you to accept my get. So now she made a shliach to accept the get. Well, we don't know when this shliach is going to accept the get, but as soon as the get reaches the shliach's hand, she's not married anymore. So then asura lechel b'truma miyad. Then we say to her, you can't eat truma right away. Right away. Now, let's say she said, I want you to accept a get in Chicago, let's say, okay? And now the guy is in New York, right? So she could eat truma until this guy had enough time to pick up the get and bring it to Chicago. In other words, she said, go pick up the get somewhere else and then bring it to Chicago. When you reach Chicago, that's when I'm a get. So there's a certain time lapse where we know that up until that point, he did not reach Chicago yet. So therefore, she can eat truma until we can estimate that the get probably reached that place. Rab Lazar says, no, she's usher to eat right away. We're going to explain it like this. The Gemara asks, what do you mean this last case? Vigita miyahava? How could this be a get if she says, accept the get in Chicago? When the guy picked up the get, let's say he picked up the get in Maine. Well, how does that work? The Chachamim said before that if she said, accept the get somewhere else, and then he brings it to someplace else, so is that a get? Well, Amar Reisha, in the beginning of the Mishnah, the previous Mishnah said, Lo Havagita, that's not considered a get. And now you're telling me it is considered a get? So it doesn't align itself with the previous Mishnah. So the Gemara, because if you look back, the Chachamim said, only received the get in, let's say, Chicago. The kibbutz law b'makam and she received the get in New York. It's possible. So how in this Mishnah do the Chachamim say it is kosher? And says the Gemara, our Mishnah is talking about a different story. Like Tzricha, the Amrle, she really said to him, I want you to accept the get in Masa Mechasya. So really, that's the place where I want you to receive the get. V'zimnam, the Mishkachas le beBavel. But sometimes you'll find my husband in Bavel. This is what she said to him. She wasn't specific. She said, pick up the get wherever you want. Pick it up in New York, Maine. I don't care where you're going to pick up. Usually my husband's in Chicago, but if you see him somewhere else, that's okay too. We go to Ahmed Bay's. But I don't want the get to take effect until it comes to Masa Mechasya. So until you actually bring it to Masa Mechasya, that's when it becomes get. So up until that time, we know she's not mugareshes, and therefore she can eat truma up until that time. Comes along the Mishnah, and it says, Rabbi Lazar oisemeyad. Rabbi Lazar said she can't eat truma right away. Why? Because she said, pick up, as soon as she said, accept the get, he could have bumped into her, and into the shliach anywhere, and right away, just because she says only receive the get in a certain place, Rabbi Lazar says, she has no right to put such a condition. And that's why she's also right away, because wherever the shliach is going to get the get, that's when she's mugareshes. So we don't know when the shliach is going to run into the husband. So the Gemara says, Pshita, that's Rabbi Lazar's opinion. He stated that in the previous Mishnah. Because a woman is never makbid where you pick up the get. And if she says, pick it up, she says, only accept it in this place, she means to say that most of the times my husband is in this place. So what is the chiddush of Rabbi Lazar's opinion over here? Like Tzricha, the Amr lay zil lemizrach the asya b'mizrach. She told the shliach, go to the east because my husband is usually in the east. But then the shliach just went in totally opposite direction, west. Mahu the same. I would think that even Rabbi Lazar would agree in this case, the husband's not in the west. Why is he going in the opposite direction? But Marav Holese, he's never going to bump into the husband in the west. Kamash Mlam, Dilma Bahade de Ka'azal, right before he left to the west, Megas Gayas Bay, Biyavle Gita. Maybe he bumped into the husband and he gave her the get. And according to Rabbi Lazar, no matter where the shliach is going to get the get, as long as you bump into the husband, she's mugareshes. Therefore, Rabbi Lazar says it asks you right away. As soon as she says, go get a get for my husband, according to Rabbi Lazar, you're also right away. Just the Gemara is going to say one thing. Whoever says to a shliach, this is a brisa number one. New story. A man says to a shliach, you know the inyan of a ruve tchumim, that you have to put down, if you want to go 2,000 amas beyond a certain place, beyond the city, you put down a food by 2,000 amas away from the city, and then you could go another 2,000 amas. So a man says to a shliach, he wants to walk on Shabbos 4,000 amas. He says, go to the 2,000 mark and aravli and make an erev tchumim bitmarim with dates. V'aravli begroigres. The guy used raisins, right? He used dried figs. Begroigris, he told him use dried figs. So basically, the shliach did not follow the precise instructions of the man on how to make an erev. He told him one type of food, and he did it with another type of food. So Tanechada, one brisa says eruve erev. That's a good erev. It doesn't matter. But Tanya Idach, another brisa says ein eruve erev. Brisa number 2 says it's not a good erev. So how do you resolve these two brises? Rabba said simple. Loy kash, it's not difficult. Ha Rabbanim. The brisa number 2 that says ein eruv erev goes according to Rabbanim. Ha, the brisa that says it's good, goes according to Rab Lazar. Ha Rabbanan, who always say that by a woman, even a woman who has no power on a get, if she says only accept the get in a certain place, we take her seriously. And if you misfollow those instructions, he's not mugareshes. The Amri Kapeda, a person is precise in his instructions. So that would hold true that even by Erev, if a man gave instructions to a shliach, only make the Erev with dates, and he goes ahead and makes it with figs, it's not a good Erev. That's why this brisa says it ain't Eruv Erev. Ha, Rabbi Lazar, but the first brisa that says that it is a good Erev goes according to Rabbi Lazar, the Amamar Mokim he loy. That Rabbi Lazar was always lenient, that sometimes people give instructions, but they don't mean it should be followed to the T. So same thing by the woman. Rabbi Lazar was very lenient and says even if she gave instructions, she's still megurashes if you didn't follow instructions precisely. So huadin by erev, even if you didn't follow the instructions precisely and you made the erev with a different type of food, it's still a good erev. That was Rabba's understanding to resolve the brises. One's Rabbanan, one's Rabbi Lazar. Yosef Amar, Rabbi Yosef says, Havara Rabbanan. Both brises go according to Rabbanan. And most of the time, Rabbanan say people are precise with what they say, and you have to follow those instructions. But Khan Bishaloi, but that's only by a woman, because a woman, she probably, when she says, I want to accept the get in a certain place, why does a woman say that? According to Rabbanan, it's because she's embarrassed to receive it in a certain place. Let's say she's from the 5,000. When she says only accept the get in Brooklyn, because she's embarrassed that she should get the get in the 5,000. So her instructions are pretty precise. Only pick it up in Brooklyn. So therefore, that's why the Rabbanan said a person's makbid. But normally, we're not makbid in what the person says. If there's no difference, then we're not going to take his word seriously. But Khan bishal chavera. But if the food belonged to his friend, if the owner did not own that food, in other words, when he said, I have my food's friend in me, take my friend's figs and use it for the Erev. And he took my friend's dates and used it for an Erev. Well, he never had permission from the friend to use it as an Erev. So if the Shliach misfollowed those instructions, it's not a good Erev. That was Rav Yosef's teretz, and that's why it's not a good Erev. Amalei Abaya said, well, the time that we learned in the Brisa, a man said, take the Erev food and put it in the tower, and he put it in the chicken coop, or he put it in the coop, in the dove coop, and he put it in the tower. In one place it says it's a good erev, and one says it's not a good erev. So according to Rav Yosef's teretz, if the difference is between the two brises is if you took the Mashaleach's food, the sender's food, or his friend's food, what kind of how can you differentiate between him and his friend over there? Over here, the instructions was, it seems that take the Erev food and put it in a certain place, and if you didn't follow it, but it should both prices should hold that it's a good, even if you didn't follow it, because there's no difference if you put it in a tower and put it in the dove coop. And says the Gemara, Hasanami Ika Peir de Migdal Peir de Shaiva. He was talking about the fruits. He was telling you take fruits from the tower or take fruits from the chicken coop. So it depends who owns the fruit, so you can resolve the same thing. It didn't mean that put it in the tower. He was telling you, take my friend's fruits, which was in the tower, and he took the friend's fruits that was in the shayvach. So it was not his fruits to be able to make that mistake, and therefore the Erev is not a good Erev. Give me another 2 minutes, and then we'll stop. We'll just do the Mishnah and the quick Gemara. Here, again, instructions and language is so important. You have to know how to speak. So if a man gives instructions and then disappears, we don't know what he meant. If a man said, Kisvu get usnil ishti, write a get and give it to my wife. Or he said, Gershua, divorce my wife. Kisvu geras, write her that letter, usnula, and give it to her. He didn't say what it is, but we understand he means a get. You should write the get and give it to her. But what does he say? Patruhu. Patruhu means pardon her. What does that mean? Or parnasu, or make her become independent. Asul communimus, or he tells the instructions was to the shluchim, do what the rule is. Or asula karoya, give her what she deserves. But he doesn't say what he means. So we can infer that he means get, or because he just had a fight with his wife, or maybe he wants to pardon her for a debt that he had, or maybe he wants to give her extra food. So we don't know he means a get. So lo yamal klum, that means we don't say he meant anything, and therefore they should not write a get. Tana Rabban, the rabbis taught. Here are the following instructions. If a man said, Shalchu, send my wife away. Shivku, let her go. Tarchu, release her. All these things are languages of get languages, and some of that language is actually written in the get. We understand he means a get. He didn't say the word get, but we know that he means the instructions are that we should write the get and give it to her. But if he said patru, pardon her, panasu, make her independent, asu la kanimas, asu la karo, do what the rule, what the moral thing to do is, do what she deserves. Well, he didn't say what he wants to be done. Lo yamakum, it doesn't mean anything. Tanya, we don't write a get. Tanya, we learned in a brisa. Rav Nassan says he makes a little different. He said patruha. If he says patruha doesn't mean pardon her. Patruha means to release her in Aramaic, because you're using patruha, then dvar kayamim. That means it's his words are effective, and you should write a get. Pitru uha, that's a Hebrew word. When you put a yud and you put a chirik, so then it's pitruhu, means that you should pardon her. Le'amaklum, it doesn't mean anything. So there's a difference. Amar Rabba commented on that. Rav Nassan, the Bavli, Rav Nassan, who came from Babylon, Vidayak, he makes a differentiation being pitrua le patrua. Whether you say pitrua or patrua. Therefore, if you say patrua, you mean get. If you mean, which is an Aramaic word. If you mean pitru, that's a Hebrew word, mean pardon her. So it's not a get. Tana didan, the Barat Yisraelhu, our Tana that says anytime you say patru or pitru, it doesn't matter. It's not an effective word. Loidayak. He says that people are not precise, are not commanding their languages, switching from Hebrew to Aramaic, and therefore they probably meant the Hebrew word, which has no effect of writing again. Then the Gemara ends off. Ibailu, let me ask you a question. Hoitzi uha. A man says, get her out of here. What does that mean? The Torah says v'yatzim abasis. She leaves. Not the Torah doesn't use the word get her out of here. Mao, is that a good language to write again? Izvu, or he says leave her alone, leave her out of here. Or hitiru. Hitiru either means permit her to marry somebody else, which is a language of a get, or hitiru means release her. Release of what? Maybe release an oath that she has. Hadihu, put her at ease. Ha'ilullah, mahu. What's all these cases? Asu la kadah, or do to her what's morally right, the moral right thing to do. Mao. So if he uses all these different languages, do we say that he means that the instructions were that they should write a get, or is the instruction something else and we don't write a get? So the Gemara leaves that in limbo. But Peshoit mi'echada, I'll answer you one question. The Tanya we learned in the Brisa, if a man said asula kadas, do to her like the moral thing to do. Asula kenimus, do what the legal thing to do is. Asula karo, or do what's appropriate for her. Well, it doesn't mean anything. Layama klum. He didn't say write her a get, or he didn't say any language that indicates that he wants a get being written. So we'll always interpret it means something else. Of course, we're dealing with a guy who just left and we can't ask him. So Baruch Hashem, we finished Daf Samach Hey.